that visits your street, and you've probably never even considered that it might be watching and following you. Maybe it's in your backyard, perched on the telephone wire outside your kitchen window, or sitting in a corner of the parking lot you walk through every morning to get to your car. You've seen it before, or another crow that looked just like it. Black, observant, there for a moment, and then gone. You probably never gave it much thought. Most people don't. But here's something you don't know. That crow is watching you and recording every detail. Not the way animals observe things out of instinct or hunger. More like the way a person studies something to understand and learn from it. It's paying attention to your daily routine, your face, your habits, and your behavior, storing them in its memory for a reason. What you're about to hear may sound unbelievable, but that crow has been keeping a record of who you are without you ever realizing it. Welcome to the channel. The facts you're about to learn about crows are based on scientific research documented by researchers at some of the world's leading universities, and they may permanently change the way you look at every crow you encounter from now on. Be sure to watch until the end, because the most shocking and astonishing part of this story is waiting for you there. They know your face because they store it in their memory and remember it for years. In 2008, researcher John Marzluff and his team at the University of Washington wanted to find out whether crows could recognize individual human faces. To test this, they designed an experiment that was almost disturbingly clever. Wearing a distinctive caveman mask, they captured several crows on the university campus, tagged the birds for tracking purposes, and then released them. Afterward, the researchers repeatedly walked along the same campus routes wearing the same mask, while at other times they walked those routes without it. The results were remarkable. The crows remembered the mask. Not only the birds that had been captured, but also crows that had never been trapped or handled and had merely watched the event from a distance. They began diving at the masked researcher, loudly scolding him, following him, and treating him as a threat. Yet when the same researcher walked the same route without the mask, passing by the same birds, he received virtually no reaction. But this is where the story becomes even more extraordinary. 5 years later, the researchers returned to the same locations wearing the same mask. By then, many of the original crows had raised offspring. Those young crows had never experienced the capture event themselves, yet they reacted to the masked researcher just as strongly. They had learned from their parents whom not to trust. A single capture event involving a mask had spread throughout an entire crow community and remained alive for 5 years. Crows do not forget faces that give them a reason to remember, and they pass what they learn on to the next generation. Crows have been scientifically documented as animals capable of holding grudges and remembering those who have wronged them. In other words, they possess something that looks remarkably similar to a sense of revenge. But surprisingly, they also give gifts, and that is documented as well. Both behaviors stem from the same underlying ability, the capacity to recognize individual humans, remember interactions, and respond accordingly for months or even years, with that information spreading throughout an entire crow community. In Seattle, a young girl named Gabby Mann began leaving small amounts of food for crows outside her home, things like dog food and pieces of bread. Then something unusual happened. The crows started bringing her objects in return. Over the months, they left buttons, pieces of glass, a rusty screw, and even a small white heart-shaped piece of foam. These were items that appeared valuable from a crow's perspective, deliberately placed in the exact spot where the food had been left. It was far too consistent to be dismissed as coincidence. This is not a fairy tale. It is a real and documented phenomenon reported by ornithologists and wildlife researchers. Kindness was met with kindness. A crow that sees you as a threat will remember that threat, share the information with other crows, and potentially pass that knowledge on to future generations. A crow that sees you as a safe and reliable source will remember that as well, and in some cases may even respond in kind, almost like a form of friendship. The crow outside your window is not simply sitting there aimlessly watching the world go by. It is gathering information. It is evaluating you. Every time it sees you, it updates its record of who you are and how you behave toward crows. Whether you realize it or not, you are already part of a relationship, and the only one who may not be aware of it is you, because the crows have already begun learning who you are. Crows possess a brain that, according to traditional neuroscience, should not be capable of the level of intelligence they display. They do not have a neocortex, the part of the mammalian brain associated with planning, abstract thinking, and long-term decision-making. For much of scientific history, this was considered evidence that birds could never achieve the kind of advanced intelligence seen in mammals. But that assumption turned out to be wrong. Instead, crows possess a brain region called the nidopallium caudolateral. Although it is anatomically very different from the mammalian prefrontal cortex, it appears to perform many of the same functions, and scientists are still working to fully understand how it operates. New Caledonian crows have been conclusively shown to manufacture tools, not just use them, make them. They carefully select plant stems, strip them down, shape the tips into hooks, and then use those hooks to extract insects from deep inside logs. Researchers have even documented crows keeping a shorter tool in reserve while using a longer one, suggesting that they are planning for a future step before it is needed. In other words, they are preparing for future problems in a way that closely resembles human-like foresight. Future planning is an extremely rare trait in the animal kingdom and is seldom observed outside a small number of highly intelligent species. But the surprises do not end there. Scientists have also tested crows with versions of the mirror self-recognition test, one of the standard measures of self-awareness. The results remain debated and the science is still evolving. However, when faced with problem-solving tasks that require an animal to understand its own position relative to objects in its environment, crows perform at levels comparable to some of the world's most intelligent primates. That means the crow sitting on your garden fence is carrying out cognitive processes that neuroscience once believed were impossible without a neocortex. It reaches similar outcomes through an entirely different biological design. Faced with a challenge, it finds another solution, and somehow it keeps finding them. Crows appear to hold what many people describe as funerals. When a crow dies, other crows from the area often gather around it. You may have seen this yourself, a sudden crowd of crows circling a spot on the ground, calling loudly and behaving in an agitated manner. People commonly refer to this as a crow funeral. Researchers Kaufman and John Marzluff at the University of Washington studied this behavior directly. In their experiments, they presented crows with a dead crow alongside a taxidermied hawk, a known predator. Neither the hawk nor the crow was alive. Both had died long before and were being used solely for scientific research. The crows responded with prolonged alarm calls, mobbing behavior, and intense attention toward the scene, particularly when the predator was present. Even long after the dead crow had been removed, they continued avoiding the location where the event had occurred. This is not grief in the human sense. Instead, the crow community appears to be conducting a threat assessment. Where did this individual die? What was nearby? What do we need to remember about this location? What precautions should we take in the future? The gathering behavior allows this information to spread throughout the groups and so even crows that were not present during the original event can learn that something dangerous happened there and adjust their behavior accordingly. To a crow community, a dead crow is not only a loss, it is also a source of information. The group processes that information collectively in real time and adds it to its shared knowledge. Think about that for a moment. The crows in your neighborhood may possess a collective map of danger built in their own way. A map containing locations, individuals, and significant events. It has been constructed, updated, and passed down through social learning across multiple generations. That map includes your street. It may include your yard, and it almost certainly includes you. How does that make you feel? Every time you see a crow perched on a wire, standing on a metal fence, or sitting motionless in the middle of a parking lot staring in your direction, think about what may actually be happening in that moment. The brain of that bird evolved along a completely different path from mammals, yet it developed solutions to many of the same problems that primates spent millions of years solving. It remembers individual faces. It teaches what it learns to its family. It learns from threats. It constantly gathers information about its surroundings and the individuals within them. It draws conclusions from what it learns. It processes the deaths of members of its community as valuable information about danger. It manufactures tools. In some cases, it even gives gifts to individuals it has decided to trust. At this very moment, it may be doing something that most animals on Earth cannot do, seeing you as a specific individual, distinct from every other human it has encountered, and placing you somewhere within a mental model of the world that it has spent its entire life building, updating, and sharing with other crows. And until now, you probably never realized it. To a crow, you are not invisible. As long as you do not drastically change your appearance, it may remember you for years. But there is an even more fascinating thought. Long before you were born, a network of information was already operating among the crows in your neighborhood. In the trees above your street and on the wires stretching across your town, a collective intelligence has been gathering observations, sharing experiences, and passing knowledge from one generation to the next. Whether you know it or not, you are one of its data points. While you were busy making dinner, walking to work, or going about your day, the crow outside your window may have been adding another entry to its mental file about you. The question is, what does that file say? Let me know in the comments. Have you ever had an encounter with a crow that seemed to recognize you personally? A strange reaction that made no sense at the time, but suddenly does now? I'd love to read your stories. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye for now.